Well, you may have heard that Deloitte announced a workforce transformation recently. Hidden inside, parental leave cut in half, $50,000 in IVF and surrogacy support gone, pension accruals frozen. The official narrative was about the future. The employees read the benefit change notice. Those were not the same stories. Hey there, senior leader, and welcome to the Talent Sherpa podcast, where senior leaders come to rethink how human capital really works. I'm your host, Jackson Lynch, and today we're going to be talking about what it actually costs when an organization loses the credibility to tell its people the truth about a hard decision that they had to make. And look, here's the thing about hard decisions. Leaders have to make them. The question is never really whether to make the call. The question instead is whether you still have the credibility after making the call to lead through the next one. And there's a very specific pattern that I've been watching across organizations. And most recently, it showed up in the Deloitte situation where significant benefit cuts got wrapped up inside this language about AI transformation and workforce modernization. I think the framing served one purpose. At least that's the way it looks from the outside. It was to make the decision feel like something other than what it really was, which was a cost out. And that distinction matters more than most leaders realize. And that distinction isn't something that's soft. It's something that behaves like infrastructure. And when it holds, you don't notice it. When it fails, you cannot run anything through it. And if you've ever watched a well-intentioned communication land badly and then spent the next 2 weeks managing the fallout, this episode names the mechanisms behind that. Now, before we get started, I want to ask you for a very quick favor. And you can go ahead and hit pause on the podcast right now. Go to wherever you're listening and like, subscribe, or in some way leave a review, 5-star ideally, on the Talent Sherpa podcast. It helps more senior leaders find the show, and it allows us to keep doing this work for the larger HR community. And I just want to say thank you to everyone who came up to introduce themselves. And we had events last week up with Gig Talent, and it was just great seeing everybody. So thanks for listening to the podcast, and thanks for coming up and saying hello. All right, so let's get into it. So here's the situation as I think it probably played out. Deloitte probably made a set of cost decisions affecting internal ops, IT, finance, administrative functions. Parental leave got cut in half. IVF and surrogacy support, $50,000 was eliminated. PTO was reduced. Pension accruals were frozen for a significant portion of the workforce. These are real business decisions, and companies have to make them. The pressure that produces them are real. And candidly, I've sat in rooms where these calls have been made, and I've sometimes advocated to make them myself. Running a business means making those hard decisions, running those trade-offs, and not every trade-off lands in the employee's favor. Candidly, that's one of the biggest changes when you're a CHRO, because you're running the enterprise, not a function. And the role of employee advocate has to sit second in the decision around having a going concern that provides the largest amount of benefit and jobs for the enterprise. But that's not part of the story that I really want to dwell on right now. What I do want to focus on is what happened in the communication, because the official announcement described these decisions as workforce modernization, AI transformation, future-ready talent moves. And the employees who lost parental leave read those words, and they were not thinking about AI. And here's where the organizations, I think, run into trouble. Not in the decision itself. It's in the gap between what leaders say and what the employees experience. And that gap is not neutral. It does not close on its own. It compounds. And I've watched this play out across enough organizations, candidly, to tell you that the communication around a hard decision does more lasting damage, usually, than the decision itself in a significant number of cases. Employees can handle difficult news. Senior leaders consistently underestimate how much an organization can absorb when it's delivered in a straight and transparent way. The damage comes from something else entirely. It's when employees conclude that leadership cannot be trusted to tell them the truth about something hard, they file that away and they don't forget it. And the next time leadership needs them to trust an announcement, they are already calibrated against that possibility. Now, the employees who lost parental leave are not thinking about AI transformation. They're calculating how much they can trust the next announcement because they saw this one and they realized it wasn't candid, it wasn't honest. And that calculation is what matters. Now, there are three structural traps that I see organizations fall into when communicating hard decisions. The first trap is confusing narrative management with communication. Leadership teams spend enormous energy on framing, what language to use, what to lead with, what to hold for the Q&As. They optimize the message to reduce friction in the room and to get through the announcement or the all hands. And that's an understandable instinct. I've had it. It's also the wrong problem to solve. The goal of communicating hard decisions is to preserve your credibility or even enhance it for the next one. Most organizations never treat them as separate problems. And when you optimize for the short game, you're borrowing against the long one. Now, the second trap is assuming employees can actually be placated by framing. So here's what's actually happening when you announce a benefit cut as workforce modernization. The employees in that room are doing the math. They know what their parental leave used to cover. They may not even plan on using it, but they know what changed and they know the dollar impact on their household if it does. And they can process that faster and more accurately than any communication team anticipates. The gap between your framing and their lived experience does not close because you chose to use softer language. It just becomes the thing that no one says out loud, at least while their managers are around. Now, the third trap is treating credibility as a resource that automatically replenishes. It doesn't. Most senior leaders behave as if credibility resets between difficult moments, as if the next town hall starts from zero. I got bad news. It doesn't work that way. Credibility behaves more like a balance. Every time your communication and your employees' experience diverge, there is a withdrawal. Make enough withdrawals without deposits, and the account is not empty in a visible sense. It is not where you need it to get through the next hard thing. So I think that credibility is organizational infrastructure. That word is doing real work there. Infrastructure. The kind of thing you don't notice when it's working, and you can't run anything through it when it's not. When organizational credibility is intact, hard decisions can actually land. They land with pain in a way that employees can process and move through. When it's depleted, even reasonable decisions get read as evidence of a continuing pattern. The next announcement does not get evaluated on its own merits. It gets evaluated against the file employees have been building in their heads. This reframing changes the communication question entirely. So the better question is, what does this communication do to our ability to lead through the next hard thing? That reframe changes everything you do downstream. Transparency is not free. It costs you something right now. It's hard. It creates questions in the room. It requires you to sit with discomfort. It means saying directly that a decision had a real cost and here's what drove it. That framing approach costs you more later, though, when you need employees to believe what you are saying about a restructuring, when you need the organization to move with you through a transformation that actually requires sacrifice. When trust is the one input that cannot be substituted for or manufactured on the spot on short notice. Now, to be candid, I've made calls that cost employees something real. And I've seen those calls communicated both ways. The difference in organizational consequence measured over the following 12 to 18 months is not subtle. Calling it something that it's not does not change what it is. It changes what people believe about you when they find out. So you're probably sitting there going, okay, what do we do now? Let me give you 3 plays that I think can change how you approach communicating a hard decision. Here's play number 1. Separate the decision from the rationale before you write a word of the external communication. Now, I've seen organizations do this. Most of them will script the decision and the rationale together in a single message. And this can sometimes create the appearance of framing, even when there is no deliberate spin happening. And oftentimes there is. But before you write the communication, I think you should write 2 separate documents internally. The first is a plain statement of what is happening, who it affects, and what the actual impact is on their lives. And the second document is the reasoning behind the decision. And then take those two and ask yourself whether the reasoning stands up if the first document were the only thing that they received. If the reasoning only holds when it is attached to the narrative, you have a problem worth solving before the announcement goes out. Here's play number 2. Close the difference between the internal language and the external language. Now, every leadership team I've ever worked with has a more honest version of this conversation, but it stays inside the room. The internal version names the cost drivers, the trade-offs considered, what else was on the table. In my experience, employees can actually handle that version. More than that, I have found that they respect it. Now, the distance between what leaders say to each other and what they say to the organization is often exactly the moment where trust erodes. Closing that distance, even partially, is worth the short-term discomfort it creates in the room. And here's play number 3. Build a credibility deposit into the 30 days after the hard announcement. If a significant decision has just cost employees something real, the communication period should not end with the announcement. The change isn't done until people are done talking about it. So one way you can help drive this thing forward is within 30 days, create one high access moment where senior leaders answer the actual questions, the unfiltered ones, the ones that never make it into the pre-submitted list. Don't do it with a slide deck. Don't do it with prepared remarks. The questions employees actually have should be answered directly. And this doesn't undo the decision. Nothing does, nor the impact. But it demonstrates that leadership is willing to stay in the room after the hard news. And that willingness is precisely the behavior that employees use to calibrate whether the next announcement can be trusted. Now, I realize I just gave you a playbook that will make your next difficult communication harder in the short run, more uncomfortable in the room, more exposed in the Q&A. You're welcome. That's roughly the job description for any leader who wants to still be trusted 2 years from now. And if there's one thing I want you to carry out of this episode, it's this. The goal of communicating a hard decision is not to land it cleanly today. It is to preserve the credibility to lead through the very next one, and the one after that, and the one after that. And those are two completely different problems. Now, thanks for spending some time with me today. I want to tell you how much I appreciate you being a part of this community of senior leaders who want to rethink how human capital really works. I want to shout out this week to Shannon from Denver, and thank you for listening, whether you are tuning in from Nashville or Amsterdam. This community keeps growing 82 countries now, and that's because of you. And if you're thinking about how to apply this to your own situation, let me point you to a couple of important resources. If role clarity is where you want to start, and it usually is, check out getpropulsion.ai. They have AI teammates that enable your leadership to focus on the work that actually drives business outcomes. And look, if you're a first-time CHRO or you're preparing to step into the role, I'd love to work with you. We have just a couple more slots left on the May 15th CHRO Ascent Academy. You can find all the information you need at mytalentsherpa.com. And that's it for this week. Until next time, keep raising the bar. Keep protecting your credibility for the moments in the future that will require it. And keep on climbing.